Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we are recording a preview podcast for the first round of the UCI Cyclocross Worldcup Season 21-2022. And with me here to do that is Tom.
Hello everyone.
It's been a while since you have been on the podcast, Tom, but nevertheless we will be taking a look ahead at the first round of the World Cup. The World Cup has had quite some changes. The calendar has been extended. How do you feel about these changes?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting proposal with the new World Cup. Obviously, last year it had quite a bit of coverage, but it didn't really happen due to the COVID situation. But yeah, this year, 16 rounds spread across Europe and the US at the start of the year. And I think it should provide some really interesting racing with a few new venues, like Val di Sole in Italy, for example. And yeah, I think it could be nice if everyone really commits to a World Cup and it gets going. But I also have this feeling that perhaps too many races, it might just become a bit overlooked, and the smaller classification events such as like the Super Prestige may take more of the stage.
Yeah, I have a bit of mixed feelings about this new World Cup. Personally, I think the concept itself of having one major classification which is hosted in different countries isn't bad. However, so far this new World Cup doesn't really provide the internationalization of the sport I am looking for. The UCI made its own rules. They said if we host 16 races, we need to go to at least 8 countries. Now they only go to 6 countries, so they're not following their own regulations. It's, in my opinion, too much, too soon. I do agree that this is part of a plan to take cyclocross to a higher level, but it really isn't there because at the moment we are just looking into more races, 6 World Cup races in Belgium, 3 in the Netherlands. I mean, it isn't really providing the internationalization I'm looking for. I would be more a fan of this concept if the riders are awarded better in terms of travel costs, which currently also isn't the case. Each rider needs to pay around €4,500 at least to make the trip to the United States. But on the other hand, if this would develop and we would get like a cross in the UK, which in my opinion is a must with how big the sport is getting in the United Kingdom, if we can get a cross back on the calendar in Spain and remove these Belgian races and remove the Dutch races, so we stick to like maybe 2 races in the Netherlands and 3 in Belgium, then in my opinion it could work and it could provide more talent from those new countries coming into the sport. But so far that hasn't been the case, and that's also why I'm pretty negative towards this World Cup, because to me it looks like it's all about money.
Totally, I would really agree with you on there. Certainly the prospect for the future is great, but I feel like we need to have a few more countries on board and potentially, like you said, rework the schedule a bit perhaps, maybe condense it down to be more like a travelling circus where people just commit for 1 month of the year. They're all just going to go to the 8 World Cup races all across Europe, Asia, USA, and will travel as one big party. Even perhaps one plane over to the USA would really make the costs much more realistic for the riders.
Yeah, I agree, and at that point it would become a very interesting option, especially if you put it a bit later in the season, but that would require a full reform of the calendar, which I wouldn't be against. But it's very complicated, and if I look personally, I think that for now they should have maybe stuck to 10 races or something. But that hasn't happened, so I guess we're here in the United States, 3 rounds, the first one being in Waterloo, as usual. What do you think here in Waterloo about the course, Tom? It's quite twisty, so what do you remember from the last time that we raced here?
Yeah, so 2 years ago was the last race here in Waterloo, and the course is pretty hard in terms of physical tests for the riders, and it did get pretty muddy as well, if I remember rightly, 2 years ago. There are some slight elevation change up on the course, some steep, powerful banks, both upwards, real power short climbs, and also some technical descents when it got a bit muddy. Plenty of twists and turns around the grounds of the Trek factory in Waterloo, and yeah, I think it provides a nice course to kick off the World Cup not too technical, but I think you can still expect some fast, close racing.
Yeah, indeed. Like there are a lot of corners, but that doesn't equal a technical course. These are a lot of fast corners, like long winding left-handers followed by a long right-hander. Like you won't really come far if you are very capable of steering, and there's quite a lot of banking indeed. And currently, if we look at the weather, there is rain forecasted on Friday and Saturday, and then a dry Sunday, which means the racing would be dry. But the days before it's muddy, and there's plenty of pre-riding on the course, also a race on Friday, which could ultimately see that the course is already pretty muddy, but that they race in dry conditions, which could be interesting. Do you think that we should be looking at the same names as 2 years ago, Aerts and Iserbyt, who have also been on great form this season?
Indeed, I really don't see why it won't be Iserbyt and Aerts in the front. Like we've seen, both being up there in the races so far this year, and yeah, it was Iserbyt who beat Aerts 2 years ago on this course, and I wouldn't be surprised personally if it's another 1, 2, 3 Iserbyt Aerts Van Toornout as it was 2 years ago.
Definitely possible. Almost everyone made the trip over. Only Laurens Zweek isn't here, and then of course the riders who are still racing on the road or have just finished their road season. But Zweek is the only one who has decided to not come here. He stayed at home. He says the costs are too much. He is a bit against what is happening of having 3 races in the United States. But we already kind of touched upon that. So Zweek isn't here, but I think indeed if you look behind, Van Toornout was really good in Molenbeek. He could be a serious challenger. Personally, I think Aerts is the big favorite. He was really strong in Gieten. And in Beringen 2 weeks ago, he was also really strong. So, yeah, I would say Aerts as top favorite. But definitely Paul Sauze, even despite Zweek not being here, a serious threat to him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it will be Paul Salzen will be lining it out again. Iserbyt Van Toornout. And then obviously Trek, Balois Trek Lines. It's their home race effectively out of the Trek office. So I think you can certainly expect Aerts and the likes of Van der Haar to be up there. And you've got to remember Pim Ronhaar had another solid performance in Gieten, under 23 world champion. I think we could see him competing up and around, certainly the top 10, maybe pushing the top 5. And of course, you can't forget young Thibaut Naes. Brilliant performances on the road. And yeah, he's still kind of finding his feet again in the field. But I think, as we've previously discussed on the podcast, he's going to be one to watch this year. And I wouldn't be surprised on a course like this. I think it could really suit Thibaut.
Yeah, definitely if it's a bit drier, I think. But we also found out that he had a puncture in Gieten, and that's why he fell back a bit. So considering that, I think Thibaut Naes is definitely somebody who can top 10 here. But I would maybe mention the name of Quinten Hermans. We haven't mentioned him. He was second in Gieten. I think Quinten Hermans is also an outsider for a podium. I don't see Hermans winning here, but I think that Hermans, he's looked okay. I think he can be a threat for a third place maybe.
Certainly always the fast starters, the Toormans guys. And Hermans, you can expect him to be in the front, along with Van Kessel. And if they can hit the front and then hang in the wheels, especially in a fast race, that could just drag them away to the podium spots.
Well, maybe another name to mention here is the name of Thomas Maine. He is riding his first race of the season, also for the Toormans team. What do you expect from him? Because last year he had quite some good results, including multiple top 10 finishes.
Yeah, Thomas is a really strong rider, and he's obviously been riding in the Toormans colours last year, and on the road he was riding for the Continental Canyon team in the UK. Some really strong results on the road. However, in the Tour of Britain he had a very heavy crash and lost a lot of skin, and subsequently did not start in the first round of the National Trophy in Derby, still recovering from his injuries. I was a bit surprised to see him make the trip over to the US actually, but if we see him on the start line, I'm sure he could be another rider who will be up there in and around top 10, maybe top 15. But yeah, I wouldn't count him out for sure.
Well, then the last names we have to mention here is basically Vincent Bastans and his American friends. Vincent Bastaan's a Belgian, of course, but he's been racing in the United States for the past 2 weeks, and he was supposed to go the week before, but he didn't have his visa approved in time, so he couldn't go. But he's been winning those races there, 4 wins out of 4 races in the United States. I think, however, that it looks to me that if we look at Vincent Bastaans, he's this rider who, on a very good day, can end in the back end of the top 10. So this is the World Cup. If Bastaans is very good, which I think he is, I think he might be able to grab an 8th place. But then I think that also already tells it. If a guy like Bastaans can comfortably win those races there with quite a big advantage over these American riders as Curtis White, as Gage Hecht, as Stephen Hyde, I don't think we should be expecting any of these American riders to come in the top 10 considering the level of the field.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you on that one. I think Bastaans, you could say he's dominated the US scene a bit. 4 wins out of 4. There have been a couple of close finishes, but I think he's looked pretty comfortable throughout the season. And yeah, in the previous years, he's not quite been up there in the Belgium crosses. So I think he'll probably be aiming for a top 10, top 5. And yeah, the Americans, if we see one in the top 10, I think that would be a surprise. I think it would be great for the sport. But yeah, I think the Americans probably will be looking at about P10, P11, P12 with the likes of Kerry Werner, Curtis White, and even Gage Hex on the start line, recently signed for Rally. So yeah, it could be an interesting one.
Yeah, definitely. So let's make some predictions here. Tom, what do you reckon for the podium?
Well, like I said earlier, I think I'm going to go for the same result as 2 years ago. Iserbyt, Aerts, Van Turnhout. 1, 2, 3.
Nah, I reckon Toon Aerts is going to take the win here. I saw him very strong in Gieten. I saw him very strong in Beringen. So basically 2 completely different courses. One muddy, one dry. So I think regardless of the conditions, Toon Aerts should take the win. Probably in front of Iserbyt, considering the parcours isn't that muddy. And then I reckon the 3rd place will go to Lars van der Haar, actually.
We'll have to see come Sunday. But yeah, I think it's certainly going to be an interesting race.
Definitely going to be interesting, but even more interesting is the start list of the women's race. I mean, I looked at this start list and wow, just wow. Almost everyone is here. I think you could only say Alvarado isn't here because she had issues with her blood levels, so she isn't here. But for the rest, all the women that you think about when you think about cyclocross, they are all here. We see for the Netherlands coming to the start line. Lucinda Brandt, Denise Betsma, Annemarie Worst, Yara Kastelein. 4 women who have been very good this season so far. But also other riders who've gotten podium finishes. Fem van Empel, Aniek van Alphen, Inge van der Heijden, Puk Pietersen, Sherin van Anrooy. And then we have Marianne Vos starting her season here. If we look for Belgium, we find Sanne Kant at the start line. We can see from the United States that Clara Honsinger is riding. We can see that from Canada, Michaelie Rochette is riding. Katharina Nash is riding. Jolanda Neff is riding. Casablanca Vos is riding. And I'm now even forgetting Evie Richards, the world champion cross-country mountain bike. I mean, everyone is here. How is this all going to fit into a top 10? It can't.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely incredible, this race. I think you just cannot call it right now. You could say the likes of Evie Richards, she could win. She could place outside the top 10. Even the likes of Brand, Betsema and Worst, they could be 1, 2, 3. They could be 7, 8, 9 for all we know. I think the women's race is going to be absolutely fantastic. And I'm really hoping we're going to be treated to a nice battle up the front. And yeah, I'm really expecting great things from this race.
Yeah, I think it's definitely hard to start in this start list, like who is going to be the best. But I think overall it's still the case that we can draw the conclusions upon the previous weeks that Brandt and Betsema look to be the strongest. I mean, Brandt only did 1 race, but regardless of that, Brandt and Betsema look to be the strongest. And then you have a lot of unknown factors. But I think Brandt and Betsema will ultimately fight it out for the win here. And then behind that, I mean, it's very hard to say. I don't know. I think for Honsinger and Rochette, that they are really good. I definitely expect them in the top 10, but I don't know where. Like Honsinger, we know that she was super strong last year, but only if the parcours was muddy, and then preferably with some climbing, because otherwise she struggled. She doesn't really look to have the technique, and we saw in the USA races that on the dry parcourses, Honsinger got beaten by Rochette. So I think if it's dry, that Rochette can definitely compete for a top 5. It's maybe a stretch, but 2 years ago she won the World Cup in Iowa. So it should be possible for her. But I think it's really hard to tell where the Americans stand, because Honsinger and Rochette look super strong in those American races, but it's very hard to compare the level. What do you expect from them, Tom?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you on that one. 2 years ago here, it was Honsinger 4th, Rochette 5th, only 4 seconds separated the pair of them. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if 4 seconds separate them again.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. But we have more question marks because Marianne Vos, she didn't have a great season last year. But then again, the last time she came to the United States for the World Cup, she was really good. I think she took the win there in at least one of, or maybe even 2 races. I don't recall that and exactly. But I think Vos, it's very hard to start your season here, but she was very good in Paris-Roubaix. She had a very good road season again. So for Vos, I think maybe a top 5. But it depends on the parcours, I guess, because if it's rainy, I don't expect a lot for Vos.
Yeah, well, she's obviously had a great road season, coming off strong with the likes of Roubaix and the World Champs, like you said. And I think we can expect some good things from Vos. And she was the winner here in 2018 Waterloo. So I certainly wouldn't count her out of this one again. It's a big commitment to make the trip over to the US, and she certainly doesn't have to be here. So I think she'll be coming with the aim to win as well.
Well, then we have 2 riders who we certainly need to mention. Olympic champion mountain bike Jolanda Neff and world champion mountain bike Avi Richards. If we look, they were racing for the Trek team in the UCI Worldcup mountain bike in Snowshoe, West Virginia a couple of weeks ago. There in Snowshoe, Richards won both the short track as the cross country. Richards after that has been a bit sick, but she looks to be at the start line here in Waterloo. Neff was second in the short track there and then had a bit of a shocker actually in the cross country, finishing 9th 4 minutes down. Nevertheless, if we look back at 2 years ago here in Waterloo, I think both got a podium finish here with a very strong last lap, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, indeed, it was Neff second, Richards third for this one 2 years ago. And I think they have the advantage of having already been in the US for quite a while now. And obviously again on home soil. They were riding for the Trek Factory team in the Trek Factory grounds. I think we could see another great performance from these two as well.
Yeah, I think for Richards, a lot depends on how she's recovered from that illness. She has been off the bike for, I think, almost a week. So in terms of Richards, I'm a bit cautious in making any predictions or expectations. But I think it's very cool that they are here. And for Neff, I mean, I think Neff is really, really strong. And if she, of course, a lot depends on her form. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see Neff focusing a bit more on cyclocross this winter, as she did in the 2018-2019 season, where she, of course, won the GP Sven Nys in Baal, and then eventually finished 6th in Bogense at the World Championships on a parcours that completely didn't suit her. And then we could perhaps see things more like the 2017-2018 season, when she was looking in very good condition for the World Championships, but ultimately DNF'd in the World Cup in Hogerheide, breaking her collarbone because of a crash. So in terms of Neff, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if she gets a podium, but I also wouldn't be surprised if she ends like 15th.
Oh yeah, I think the field is just, there's so much depth of talent now in the women's field. It's brilliant. And it's so nice to be able to come into some races and really be a bit unknown. So it's certainly going to be one to watch, that's for sure.
Well, the last 2 names I want to mention here before we make our predictions is the name of Katharina Nash. She won the World Cup in Waterloo 2 years ago. That's why I'm mentioning her. I don't expect anything from her. Age has unfortunately caught up to her, but quite the opposite is the case for Casablanca Vas. Recently she finished 4th at the Olympic Championships mountain bike, and then she also ended fourth at the World Championships road race. Crazy, second at the Under 23 European Championships road. Crazy talented, riding for SD Works. Katharina Vos also last year won in Bredene, had a super strong season. Do you think that she can compete for the win or maybe a podium?
I think that's another really good question, and like we've said, anyone could be in the top 15 really. But combining the road and the mountain bike, yeah, perfect combination for cyclocross, isn't it? And I think she's proven herself in both disciplines, so absolutely no reason why she won't be up there again on the cross bike.
Yeah, I think for Vos, the talent is just insane, as I just mentioned, her results. And I think it's very hard to put an expectation in terms of result, but considering last year she already had some very good results. I think she ended third in Tabor, or at least she's gotten a number of top 5 finishes in the World Cup. I think Vos is going to end on the podium, and I know Issam, who isn't here now, also has very high expectations for Vos this season.
Indeed, she'll certainly be one to watch throughout the year.
Yeah, I'll just correct myself here ever so slightly. She ended fourth in Tabor, just missing out on the podium, and ended fifth in Namur, so that are indeed a number of top 5 finishes, just like she ended in Hulst. So I guess she can be very satisfied with those results last year and build on them this year. We should go into making a prediction, and if you don't mind, I'll go first, Tom.
Absolutely, go for it, Noah.
Well, I am going to go with the unsurprising win of Lucinda Brandt for the Trek Baloise Lions, but I think Katharina Vos is going to end second, and in third place we will find Denise Betsema.
And I'm gonna mix it up again. No need to go for the same prediction when there's 15 others who could win it, you know. I'm gonna go for Neff first on the home soil of the Trek factory. Then I'm gonna go worst in second, actually. I feel like she might put in a strong showing on this kind of course with Brand in third.
Well, that's definitely an interesting prediction, and I think only time can tell this Sunday, evening European time. For more information on the start time, start list, TV broadcast, etc., make sure to check cyclocross.social.com/live. You will find all the information there. Tom, thank you so much for being here today in this preview podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be back on the show.
And as said, we will be covering the World Cup here in Waterloo, and later we will also be making podcasts towards the following World Cups, and those are in Fayetteville next week on Wednesday and Iowa the week after on Sunday. If you enjoyed, make sure to share it with your cyclocross friends and leave a rating, and I will catch you guys after Waterloo. Goodbye.